Hello there and a very warm welcome to another show. I'm Victor Matthias. Welcome against Channels Beam. Now, Nigeria's Twitterati, or you could even say global Twitterati, was thrown into a frenzy after CEO Elon Musk announced temporary new rules and limits to be implemented into the operation of the microblogging site. Now, according to Mr. Musk, the changes were made to, quote, address extreme levels of data scraping and system manipulation. Now, details of the changes came after many Twitter users complained about issues loading tweets on Saturday, and including receiving error messages saying rate limit exceeded. Now, those changes came in 3 different tweets by Mr. Musk, and that has brought to the fore the need for Nigeria and even other countries to follow in the footsteps of some nations to create its own social media network and free itself from the whims of CEOs like Mr. Musk, and that will be our focus on the show today. But before we get into all of that, let's first of all take a look at other stories that made the trends in the past week.
Nigerians have been divided following the revelation that students have been forging their JAMB scores. While some have made it a tribal war, some have attributed the act to the weakness of the exam-setting body system and called for a revamp. JAMB has since responded and threatened to withdraw the results and prosecute the culprit. Following the release of the European Union's final report on the 2023 general elections, which drew a fierce reaction from the federal government, Nigerians have been weighing in on the verdict of Europeans. While some say the report vindicates their claim of how the elections were conducted, others urge the EU to channel its energy on other democracies that have failed to conduct credible elections in the Western world.
Well, there you go. Those were the trends in the past week. Sadly, the JAMB issue, of course, which is related to education, was also one of the top trends. Hope that is nipped in the bud to forestall future occurrences. But joining us to look at today's show, we have with us, joining us via Zoom from Port Harcourt, Uche Aniche. He is a tech and business innovation leader. Uche, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Victor. A pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. We also have joining us from our studios in Kano, Mariam Lawan Gwadabe. She is the founder of Blue Sapphire Hub. Mariam, it's also a pleasure to have you on the show.
Good evening. Good afternoon, Victor.
Good afternoon, Mariam. Thanks again for joining us on the show today. Let's just get you to kickstart the conversation for us. Mariam, what were your reactions? Were you one of those who got that message when you tried loading your Twitter account on Saturday? Did you have the rate limit exceeded as well?
Well, actually, I haven't checked that, so I haven't experienced it.
Okay. Yeah, but I mean, so this is just like one of many changes that we have seen or noticed, since Elon Musk took over Twitter. And, there's been always this back and forth, as to how things can be done differently. But, I mean, he sent 3 tweets. Let me put it now in Nigerian parlance. First of all, he gave a figure, he upped the figure again, and then he gave us another figure. So first it was 600, then 800, and then, 1,000. In Nigerian parlance, they would say, he's using us to catch crews. Is that the case in this situation?
Yeah, it is. It is because the way it's been portrayed is after giving a statement the first time and then you change it the second time and then you change it the third time. Of course, and he knows that he has a lot of traffic that comes from Nigeria. So of course, it's given that vibe to people that okay, there is something that is it's like as someone is trying to catch crews with us and make us like tweet a lot and converse about the platform and get people to start making subscriptions and trying to up their limits so that they can be able to access more and get returns on that. So that's I think it's like a game being played, a marketing trick that it's being played, and I think it's getting the success it needs to get from their own perspective, the company's part.
Absolutely. So, I mean, that has been Mr. Musk's major drive, like you said, subscriptions and, money making generally. So, But how do we change this trend? Because now we're beginning to see that it seems Twitter is already embedded in the DNA of almost everyone who has used it, be it for a day, 2 or 3. But how do we begin to take ourselves out of this subservience, so to speak? How do we free ourselves and, find something else, an alternative, so to speak, an indigenous alternative, if possible?
Okay. So I think the best option is now to start thinking about how do we come up with our own platform that has Nigerian investors in it, that is built by Africans, or let me say Nigerians, and it is being driven by Nigeria. And I believe we are capable of achieving that. It's just that we need so many things that needs to come in place to be able to drive that. That it comes from the policy aspect, to have policies, favorable policies that would enable the startups to come up with those innovative ideas, and also investments. We need to have investors that are willing to invest in these indigenous solutions, and also we need to have the right manpower and skills to drive the initiative. So actually, it comes with a lot of intricacies that needs to come in, and we have it. So the major thing is actually policies and also investment. So get the investors to actually invest in our solutions, and we will get things rolling.
Well, it's good you've made mention of all of this, and it's good you run a hub in Kano. But I'll come back to you in just a moment. Let me quickly move to Port Harcourt, where Uche Aniche, who coincidentally also runs something similar to a hub. He runs what is called Startup South. Let's also get to hear from him what he thinks the solutions could be, especially in regards to being able to create something indigenous. Again, Uche, what are we not doing right in trying to get our own social media platform? We've seen it done in other places. China has Weibo. There's Coup somewhere else. Nigeria also tried to build Crow some time back when Twitter was suspended. But here we are, again, subservient to Twitter.
Okay, Victor, I think what we should look at is where we are in the technology space, right? The whole social media and social networking effect, trajectory, there's this thing about scale, and there's this thing about unwillingness for people to want to move away from something that they're already used to, right? So anybody who is looking to build something new today is going to struggle with that. Not that people have not tried. Quite a number of people have tried to build stuff, but it hasn't taken off. And again, social networking, as we know it, has evolved over time and has matured. And because of that maturity, it's almost difficult for anybody to say he wants to build a social network today. It involves a lot of resources to be able to move people away from where they are. Donald Trump tried to build Truth Social, for instance, and it is still struggling as we speak, right? Not to talk of Nigeria. So China was able to do what they did because at the time they were doing it was when social media was still growing. And besides, China is practically like closed. So there's this back of the government, force of government that made it possible for Chinese to adopt what they have today. So I think to a large extent, what we need to do, or whatever social media that needs to be built today, would then depend on. I think people need to go niche, right? But even at that, there's still going to be a lot of challenge with that. I think that what we could do, I'm not sure whether saying that we have to build our own social media network is way to go, but I know a couple of people trying to do that. At least I know a guy in Owerri trying to build a social media network as we speak. I don't know how far they're going to go. We have one. Nairaland is one social media network that in spite of the fact that it has grown, it's one of the biggest we have in Nigeria, but it's still not there in terms of what's it called. So truthfully, I can't say, I don't think it's about money at the moment.
Yeah.
But in as much as I know that there is resources that needs to be pumped in, but I don't think it's about resources. I think it's about people being able to think. But again, I think time is not on our side to do that.
Very well. I'll come back to you in just a moment. But as the show kick-started, Samuel Emmanuel also joins us right here in our Abuja studio. Samuel, again, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you very much.
Of course. So, I mean, a lot of water has gone under the bridge since the show started. Solutions are being proffered here and there, as to how we can remove ourselves, so to speak, from the subservience that we seem to be having, from global technology apps. But in your own estimation, what can we do differently? He just talked about time will tell, but the clock is ticking. How soon, can we see a change being effected?
It's all about policy. We've tried, and at Start Innovation Hub with Anson Johnson in 2015, we happened to work with NCC. There was this policy that we're trying to build on social network, from WhatsApp to the likes. From like China, it's all about the policy that runs even the old Weibo and WeChat is managed by this government itself. So the policy drives these things. If there's no policy, good policy on ground, we can't go anywhere. Another thing is investors. Most Nigerian investors want it to be done now and they get their profit. Return on investment is what they are eager to get. It's like you tell somebody, we build an app, we run it for 10 years for you. He said, no, I can build a filling station or a hotel instead. So they put their money there. They don't see the long-term benefits on this. So the policies one, the investors' eagerness is another thing. And another thing...
So that puts pressure on the founders?
Yes. That put pressures on the founders. Like when we were running our hub, we have to do other things to fund our hub. Some guys came in from Sweden. They said, no, it's the government that is supposed to fund this up. You have set it up. The government should fund it, but it's not happening. So it's all about the policies. If you go to NIDA, it's the same thing. You go to NCC, it's the same thing. NIRA and all these things, it's the same thing. Even hosting in Nigeria is even cheaper to host in Vietnam, all these countries, than hosting in Nigeria. And it's all about policy. So startups cannot really, they don't have the financial manpower, financial strength to run this thing to a certain standard where it grows and they start making profit. For like 6 to 7 years, Facebook was not making profits. They were running on just... So it takes time.
That's a fact a lot of us who wouldn't have even known that Facebook ran for 7 to 8 years without profit.
No, they didn't. They didn't have.
Yeah. So I mean, speaking of, government policies, are you saying that we should have a tight knit? Because if you look at a country like China, which is not running a democracy, they perhaps are running their government differently than we that are running a federalist system. Don't you think perhaps that's where the differences might come in?
The difference is the fear instead of faith. The government are afraid instead of having the faith in developers. They're afraid of the system taking over their regular manual way of doing things, analog way of doing things. And it's slow. Let me give you an example. When we built Akauke simply means where are you going? Like where are you going? Like the bike, that is the number language they use. So we call it Akauke. We call in the government, the transporters, both the KK, all of them. It was supposed to be a crowd boarding and a solo boarding taxi hailing app. But when they came, they were afraid that it's going to take, we were trying to give them more customers, but they were afraid that we are going to even take customers from them. But when Uber came, boats came, it's still doing the same thing.
Exactly, because I was going to say, I mean, if we had built something, indigenously and it wasn't accepted, however, we accepted, people like you just mentioned. So now I'm beginning to think where exactly the problem is. Is it us? Is it the government?
It's the government.
Is it complex? We'll talk more on this. Let me just hold you there for a bit. We did take a quick break, and of course, we'll be back to look at more on this as to why indigenous apps are not succeeding as well as their counterparts from other parts of the country that are being imported into Nigeria. That's in a moment. Please stay with us. Many thanks for staying with us. We still have with us our panelists right here in the Abuja studio, Kano studio, as well as via Zoom from Port Harcourt. So again, let me come back to you just to get your thoughts as we wind down this conversation. Speaking of the inability for Nigerian or indigenous Nigerian applications to thrive in comparison to the ones that are being imported from other parts of the country. And it seems to me that, when that doesn't happen, those companies or the big techs now take those brains behind those apps and put them in their own system. Is that one of the reasons why we haven't seen the persistence for these apps to at least give them a good run for their money?
They don't even take the brand. They even make us advocates of their own products. If you check like Google, the likes of Facebook, Microsoft, and most of the developers I know have left.
To Google, to Microsoft?
No, they have left developing. They're now evangelists, what we call evangelists, advocates. They run programs, they are like trying to make them understand, make them to understand the market, the Nigerian market or the African market. They are like researchers for them.
Penetrate.
Yes, they are researchers for them. And at that level, they are being paid well. So what will you be doing sitting down to write codes when you are being paid well to do other things? And so the few that have had this chance, they have left the wagon.
Wow. Let me quickly go to Kano again, where we have Mariam Elon standing by. Mariam, again, the issue of money is coming back into this conversation. Earlier on, you made mention of, investments, which was reiterated by Sam here in the studio. So let's look at investment again. If you look at, some of the tech blogs and newsletters that we've been getting, you tend to hear figures of how Nigerian tech companies, or especially in the fintech sector, getting billions of funding from the outside world. Why aren't we seeing that in such spaces? Per se, maybe in transport, in social media, like not social media, but chats and all of that, where we are even a lot more invested. What's the difference between these two sectors? Why aren't we seeing that kind of investment in fintech, in these areas?
Okay, so it starts with it's the trend, and they have seen the success of what is really it's achievable. So already the fintech is where the world is looking at because of financial inclusion challenge that is within the African space. So this is a major challenge of a lot of unbanked people and all that, and they feel like, okay, if they tap into that sector, they are going to get a lot of return on investment. So that's why a lot of and there is impact there. There is impact and there is ROI there. So that's why a lot of investors are looking at the fintech sector, while other sectors are left behind. And even the startups, actually, because they feel like, okay, a lot of investments will go to fintech solutions. So even if you started building something around transport, even if you start logistics, or if you start building something around the social media and you see that it's not viable, you pivot to build a fintech because immediately you put it out there, you get investment there. So it's actually because the investors are investors that comes from their they come from not within Nigeria, so they don't have really deep understanding of our challenges. So, and this is where they are focusing. They know about the financial inclusion challenge and they want to invest in that area. But assuming we have a lot of investors that are within the Nigerian space, they know the challenges. So of course they will look at, okay, healthcare is where if a solution is being built in the healthcare, I would like to invest in that because I I have experienced that, and I know that it's going to get a lot of return on investment there. But the 77% of investment that comes into Nigeria within the fintech space and other spaces, 77 are from the from international venture capital organizations, company firms, while and only 23% is from the Nigerian space. So you see with this 23%, also they are also looking for fast return on investment. So fintech is given that. Why should they look at other sector? So I believe it's just now that I've seen African Venture Capital Fund is being launched. I just read it today, and I saw that it's looking at the African space, and it's going to start investing in various startups, even right from the idea stage. Right from the idea stage, giving $100,000 and all that. So you see, this will actually really change the narrative, change the way things are being done in terms of investment and in terms of building tech startups. Because if you get investment from idea stage, I'm sure people will start looking at healthcare, will start looking at logistics, will start looking at other sectors to build solution around those sectors.
Very well. Let's hope that happens as soonest. And like you said, the capital fund, the African Venture Capital Fund that was launched would actually go a long way. But again, let me head to Port Harcourt. Uche, so in all of this, let's even now begin to speak about how startup founders and developers, techpreneurs can begin to position themselves, with the needed research, the needed statistics to present not only to indigenous capitalists or investors, but also, to those abroad, to be able to let them know that if they begin to invest in such areas, I mean, what's it called now? The ROI is perhaps or might just be instant. What should these persons be doing to position themselves in the right place?
Okay, thank you, Victor. Luckily, I can speak from both sides of the spectrum. I can speak as an investor and as well as from an ecosystem builder perspective, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to say that one of the things that's been highlighted is that there's debt of, I think there's a bit of information that is lacking in our ecosystem, and that's part of. I think at the end of the day, I would say that's part of what is, causing the challenge that we think we have. I can tell you that yes, the investors. I don't think that the investors are much of the problem, because I used to think that way. So here's the thing. Yes, we need more people to get involved and begin to fund startups. But I also think that a lot is not happening from the startup part to get to meet who actually is investing. For instance, we have Southeastern Journal Network. Yesterday was Sunday evening. There was a pitch by 3 startups. Today by 5 o'clock, there's going to be another pitch by another 3 startups pitching to end investors that are looking to invest in founders, especially in the south and southeast of Nigeria, right? Now, I think to answer your question straight is most founders need to get involved in communities, okay? What has happened a lot is that people who are developers, in quotes, have been more of techies, and they've always congregated amongst themselves as technologists, as people who can develop or code. And so the ecosystem, the startup ecosystem, has not expanded to include other professionals that can help build creative and fundable startups, right? So a lot of the startups, which is one of the reasons why a lot of the startups that you see raising money, for instance, a lot of their founders are people who schooled abroad and came back to Africa or came back to Nigeria, okay? Now, there is that exposure gap that needs to be bridged, okay? Which is what communities like Startup South is doing, bringing professionals from across the divide, to meet, So that's what our communities across the entire cities, the South, Southeast are trying to do, so that these people are able to learn what it takes to build that kind of startups that get investors. Okay, so I mean, when you have that knowledge and then you get to network with professionals from other fields, then you're able to solve problems. And then I'd like to speak to something that Miriam was talking about.
Quickly, we're winding down.
Yeah. Let me just do that in 60 seconds. Now, part of why you felt fintech is because we are at the stage where we're building infrastructures. Most of the startups building right now are basically working on infrastructures. It's not the same thing as, and which is also why we don't care about social media at the moment, because we face like an infrastructural fundamental issues and still problems here. So at the moment, health tech is people building infrastructure or platforms around health tech, prop tech, fintech. Fintech is already leading, but health tech is coming up, prop tech is coming up, and logistics is also coming up. So those are places where investors are focusing, because they believe that we still have fundamental issues in Africa. And so people building in those places, including agri-tech, for instance, so people building in those places are beginning to see funding go to them. So I think that's part of why we're not doing social media here.
Well, let's hope that, all of that, like you said, fundamental challenges that we're facing in Africa, hopefully, all of these prop techs, agri-tech, and all ed techs, solutions that have been built would at least solve those problems and also gain global recognition, like the other ones that we've seen being brought into the country. But I have to say thank you to you, Uche Aniche, for joining us, as well as Mariam Lawan. You joined us from our studios in Kano on the show today. Thanks to you both for joining us on the show. And also thanks to you, Sam, for joining us on the show as well today. Hopefully, in the nearest future, things would change and, would have an app that would all look up to that has gained global recognition, and that would smile and say, this is a Nigerian creation that has gained a global acceptance. So, again, thanks for coming to the show.
Thank you very much.
And sharing your thoughts. Well, that's where we are. That's where we'll wrap the show up today. Thank you so very much for watching. I'm Victor Matthias, and we'll leave you with the most viewed videos on our YouTube channel in the past week. Bye for now.
This week's top 5 videos begin with a handover ceremony between the outgoing Chief of Defense Staff and his successor. The return of President Bola Tinubu to Nigeria from a private visit to London is up in 4th.
I know what it means to be a refugee.
And President Tinubu maintaining that his greenback passport is what he still has comes in 3rd.
And my greenback passport is what I still have now. I know what it means. So please, we need your prayer, we need your support, we need your interventions to get our people's change of mind.
Second spot is taken by the fracas that ensued during the Eid prayers in Osogbo, the Osun State capital. While in first position and topping the charts is the submerged houses and vehicles in Trademore Estate, Abuja, is once again flooded.